Hello, my name is Rishika Subati, and today I'm interviewing Mr. Shah. He is the CEO of a sustainable startup company. I first connected with Mr. Shah through a District C program, which links students with real world business challenges, and this led to my internship with him at microWatt. I'm so excited about this interview. Let's get into it.
I basically, from education perspective, I went to Penn State for electrical engineering, and then after which I came to Raleigh to work at John Deere. And at John Deere, I've essentially my focus coming into the company was to get as much diverse experience as I can because I was very interested in learning about how the business runs and what it takes really, right, to uh, get products into the market. And so I worked in being an engineer from school. I started as an electrical engineer at John Deere, but then took a variety of different roles and into different product lines as well. So I worked as engineering. I worked on autonomy to design autonomous vehicles. And then I also worked in the golf, I guess, product line as a product manager. And then I worked as a program manager, which essentially is I'm running a team of 15, 16 different people who are all coming from like different functional areas. And my job is to define projects and then execute projects and then bring new products to the market, essentially leading this team. And so I worked as a program manager and then as a product manager again for a different, we call it the Gator utility vehicles. So working as a product manager for that. In between my experience at John Deere, right? So I started working at John Deere and then 5-ish years into it, I went to do my MBA at NC State. And the reason I waited was really because having 3, 4, 5 years of experience working, you sort of understand, right, how to connect what you're learning in school with the real world. And so I felt that was quite important. And so I waited, and then I was doing my MBA part-time, which gave me basically essentially it gave me the opportunity to in real time connect what I'm learning in school at work and really enhance my learning that way. So yeah, as far as microwatt goes, and then over the past year and a half or 2 years or so, I started microwatt. I've been passionate about sustainability for a very long time, and I wanted to use my skill sets and to essentially build something that helps with a low carbon economy. And coming from John Deere is a very much operations manufacturing focused company and engineering focused company. I sort of had a chance to firsthand see what right, like what works, what doesn't work, and how can you make a manufacturing company more sustainable. And so connecting my experience from John Deere and then my passion for sustainability, right, I truly felt that carbon management in manufacturing was a was in some ways where the biggest opportunity was for microwatt. And so that's where we are focusing with microwatt. So been running microwatt now for a couple of years as founder CEO. And
No worries. That was a good introduction. It was very good. So I also wanted to ask a bit about, is there a specific memory that you remember where you were like, oh, I'm gonna start microwatt now because of this specific instance? Was there anything like that for you?
so I think people have sort of a misconception, right, in terms of like, the common conception is that like because you see on TV, you see in movies, right? And they're basically showing that, oh, this person had an idea and then they started this company and then they become wildly successful. I think in real life, that is not true. That is uh, essentially, that's very, very rarely that something like that will happen with someone. So I wouldn't say microwatt, even though it's like a couple year old, right, company. Um, microwatt essentially for me in my mind started like years and years ago. I would say because like I mentioned, like I was passionate about sustainability, and coming out of school, right, like uh, I kept thinking about, okay, how do I basically connect what I know with something in sustainability to make a company, to build a company. And but then I also lacked experience, right, in terms of what it takes to make things work in real life. And so that's sort of why coming into John Deere, my uh, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to work into different parts of the business was so that I can learn what it takes to run a company and build a business. Uh, I would say it's been an iterative journey, right? Uh, I mean, we looked at from microwatt perspective, right? We looked at many different models, right? Uh, from carbon management standpoint, from energy efficiency standpoint as well, on what are some of the spaces where there's an opportunity and what is something that some other company is not currently addressing. And so it's been an iterative journey. And I mean, Rishika, you experienced this firsthand as well, right? Like we were working as a helping carbon management, right? And then now we are sort of narrowing our focus into manufacturing carbon management, or specifically like around product carbon footprint, right? And so I will say it's an iterative journey. I think it always remains an iterative journey. So I wouldn't say there was like one experience that made me say, okay, now it's a perfect time, or now this is like what the company is gonna do. But then over time, as you actually start working and start doing things, right, you sort of realize what's working, what's not working, and you tend to shift accordingly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, you mentioned that you had to iterate a lot about your idea of microwatt as a business, and it seems like you had to think a lot about it and develop the ideas. So, what were some of like the struggles you first encountered when you were kind of settled down and had like, a general idea what the business was? Like, what were the first time struggles?
I mean, it's very so there's a difference, I would say, between uh saying you are going to do something and then um let me put it this way, right? Like sustainability in general, right? It's a very vast space, right? And so when I said I want to work in sustainability, all right, like look at something that helps the economy or the just the world in general become more sustainable, right? Now that's a very broad term, right? That is like saying I'm going to save the world, right? Sure, you could, but then practically how is the most difficult part, right? Because then you have to basically find a combination of what you're good at, right? What are you good at? And then um, what are you what is somebody willing to pay you for, basically, right? From a company standpoint. And then you have to narrow focus because you could do 10 different things, right? But then as a company, I think it is quite important for you to find the one thing that you can do today, and you can basically get somebody to pay you for that one thing. It is so, and finding that one thing, I would say, is the most difficult part, right? Because it doesn't happen until when you start, you have this general idea of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But then in order to get to the one specific thing that you are going to do first, and then you're going to bring them to the market first, uh, is probably the most difficult thing, I would say. because it requires focus. It requires you to not get distracted, right, with the shiny object that, because there'll always be like something, you work on something and you're like, oh, like just learned this, maybe let me go run in that direction. And obviously I've been guilty of that too myself, right? But then you sort of learn from your mistakes, or you sort of learn from, I wouldn't say mistakes, right? But you sort of learn from your experiences, in terms of, right, what you should be focusing on or what you should be working on. And just keeping that discipline to keep asking the questions on why will somebody want this? What kind of problem does it solve for them? And then is the problem big enough for them to that they're willing to pay someone to solve this problem for them? That's, I think, being able to connect. So a lot of companies or people in, right, the sustainability field especially, right, they focus a lot more on saving the world part, versus they try to say like, okay, if I'm saving the world, then I don't need to make money. I don't think that works, because at the end of the day, like, if you're not profitable as a company, right, then it's a very fast way to die very quickly, right, as a company. So like, somebody's gotta, like, if you have to make money, the person who's paying you has to see a return on their investment, right? So finding a ways to connect those two with sustainability, I think is a big challenge.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about microWatt and kind of like the stuff it does. I also wanted to ask, so you mentioned how microWatt kind of emphasizes businesses being profitable and being sustainable. So could you say, like, practical terms, how could small and medium businesses benefit from adapting more sustainable processes?
Company, in a lot of ways, right? Sustainability in general, right? Like, it's in today we use the term sustainability, right? It's a nice, shiny, fancy term or buzzword that a lot of people or companies are using, right? But it is, in simple words, it is nothing but like making the most use of the resources you have is what sustainability is, essentially, at the end of the day, right? And so as a company, when you become sustainable, you are sort of making the most use of the resources you have, right? And that could mean that you're finding ways to accomplish the exact same thing using less resources. And when you do that, right, like, it will turn into lower cost of whatever you're making or selling. And so that, in some ways, or that basically will help you become more profitable as a company, because now you're able to, if you're able to very efficiently do the same A to B task, then, like, I mean, think about, you're going from Raleigh to Durham, right? There are very different ways of going from Raleigh to Durham, right? You can take a car, you can take a bus, right? Someday, hopefully, we have a light rail, right? Or uh, maybe some people could take a small private jet, right? Like, if they had a means to do that. So there are all these different ways that you can get from Raleigh to Durham, right? But then figuring out which one of these is the most efficient way will probably save you money, and it will be better for the environment.
That makes sense, yeah. So you mentioned how, like, you could help businesses be more efficient with their resources that they have. Could you explain, like, a specific way that microWatt could do this? Like, give a generic example or a specific one, whichever you prefer.
Yeah. So basically, from the standpoint of uh, with microwatt's business, right? Like, we're focused on helping, first of all, like, a product carbon footprint for a company, and what that means is essentially tracking their raw material usage, how their manufacturing processing goes, logistics, right? So that means material coming from the supplier over to the company for them to process it and then ship it out to the customer, whoever that is in their case. And then end of life, right? So looking at, is whatever they're selling recyclable, or is it ending up in a landfill and whatnot, right? And so I think one of the ways that we help companies figure out how to become more sustainable. I'll give a small example of like logistics planning. So companies are using probably some sort of transportation from their supplier over to their manufacturing facility. Uh, Being able to figure out what is there are the 9 feet containers that the stuff gets shipped in, and being able to figure out how to most efficiently package that, or figuring out, right, like how much per unit, how much you're spending in shipping cost as far as like carbon emissions goes, will help you understand, right, like where your hotspots lie. Uh, Basically, if you know where your process is very carbon intensive, you know that that is where you need to look in terms of like, do I need to change something in terms of how we are shipping this? Do I need to change something if we help track assembly lines, right? And then you can look at, okay, do I need to change something on a particular assembly line? Why was it less energy efficient last month while it is more energy efficient this month, right? And so is this a process lacking or a process efficiency thing that you need to change? And so essentially microWatt's Carbonus, our tool, helps you get the data that tracks this over time, and then helps you understand what really is your product carbon footprint and a snapshot of time, and then track it over a period of time so that you can understand where some of the inefficiencies are.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that idea. It makes a lot of sense, especially with like what microwatt's aim is. I also wanted to ask just in general, like I've heard a lot about, emerging technology and stuff. So what's one like emerging tech or emerging trend that you're seeing in sustainability that you're really excited for?
Uh, I don't know if this is like a sustainability trend, but I mean, I'll use a cliche right now, right? Artificial intelligence in general. Uh, I think it is definitely going to multiply companies' ability to uh, right before, as far as sustainability practices go, right? In some ways, artificial intelligence is going to help you understand your data a lot better, and then digest your data a lot better, and then give you pointers in terms of where you need to look, what you could potentially change, and how can you become more sustainable as a company. And because there's obviously, right, like a lot of companies have tremendous amounts of data, right? And the problem has most of the time been, right, like how do you digest that data and turn it into actionable information, right? And I think artificial intelligence essentially helps you bridge that gap and helps you get to some of the actions that you can take a lot faster than you could before. And so that's the one that I'm very excited about in terms of, I think now, and microwatt's tool, essentially that's it'll help you um, digest all your data a lot faster and then turn it into actions a lot faster. And yeah, I think that's really a game changer because now you're augmenting human skills to a whole another level.
So I was curious to ask, like, just speaking from my personal experience, a lot of times I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing and this thing, but then I just never actually do the thing because I'm so unmotivated. And I'm assuming the same thing happens with businesses where it's like, oh, these are the steps we need to take to do this, but businesses may never prioritize that or may never actually start the first steps. So why do you think that's the case?
Um, I think it depends on what was the driver of that motivation in the very first place. If it is something that you personally really care about, then I mean, business at the end of the day is a group of people, right, who are coming together to work on something. And so then you have to look at what excites those people, right? And whatever they're working on or whatever they're tasked with, is that exciting for them? And if it is not, then you'll run into what you're describing, right? Wherein to a certain extent, you can get people to do things right that you want them to do. But then, like, for example, uh, there's a different, I mean, any uh, restaurant that you go to, right? There are like people working in the kitchen, right? Or high school students, right? Like are taking a summer job, right? Their primary goal is to just be there, maybe make money over the summer, and then leave, right? And go back to school. But then they're not there. Like very rarely you'll have someone who's like super excited to be there, right? They're there to get that experience and enjoy or make some money over the summer, right? And so if you have a lot of that in your company, then yeah, you will end up in situations where things are not followed upon, right? But then you have to figure out a way to excite people and make them really care about what they're working on. And if you have that, then I think things will automatically start happening.
That's a good idea. Like if um, also just wanted to ask, a lot of times, with business, with situations like this, you kind of hope for a solution that fixes everything type of situation. So, do you think there could be a policy or I don't know, a rule or something that that businesses could follow to help them be more sustainable, or do you just think that's completely unrealistic?
I think it goes back to again, right? Like helping people understand the motivation behind becoming more sustainable. I think if you can connect that for people, then you will automatically have people making decisions that are more sustainable, right? It's not about, I think the maybe the misconception is that, right? Like there are, we talked about this, right? Is like there are always the grand gestures of like putting a whole solar farm or putting a brand new sustainable something, right? Depending on the type of your business. But then it is the daily decisions that you're making that probably make more of an impact, right? And which is where like microWatt as a company also focuses on, right? Is looking at your entire process to help you figure out the small decisions that you're making, how are they impacting your overall sustainability journey as a company, right? Like overall carbon emissions, because it's small steps. It's the small steps that are making a difference, right? And so if you connect the why for people in your company on why should they be making more sustainable decisions or environmentally efficient decisions, then I think automatically the people will be motivated or excited to make a decision that certain way. So I think the best way to become more sustainable as a company is have a mindset, right, that you develop for the people and then just help them or let them implement that mindset.
So you mentioned that that this could cause people to feel more motivated to actually support the business. So what role do you think people in general have in sustainability and supporting businesses?
I mean, again, right, like business is nothing but a set of people coming together, right, and working on something. So I think, I mean, it is all about the people who are working there and how motivated are they to do things that are more sustainable, right? And so, uh, I mean, you will always have the outliers, right? People in general want to do good things in general, right? There will always be the 10% or on both sides of the equation who are just not right, like not going to follow that. But then if you can get the other 80% motivated, right, to do the right thing, then I will say you have a win in your hands, right? Because then you will have a business that is running efficiently. I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like I think most people, so it's all about the metrics too, right? Yeah, that's the other thing wherein people are looking at what kind of metrics you're looking at. Cost is one, right? Wherein most people have the mindset of like, how do I save money for personally or for my company? right? Most people have that metric. I think the metric that's missing is sort of looking at cost over time, right? Which is where sustainability plays in, right? Where it's like in one decision, this might seem cheaper, right? But over a long period of time, right, making an alternative decision, which is probably also more of a sustainable decision, might be the cheaper decision to make over a period of time, right? So figuring out which metrics are we looking at as a company is probably going to help people get there in terms of how making your company more sustainable.
Um, I also wanted to ask, like, on by a customer standpoint, why do you think, I guess, how do you think customers can impact a business and whether or not they're more sustainable or what type of decisions they make with business processes?
I mean, it's all about. I mean, you see, right? Like, it was very interesting. I was at Target yesterday, and I was going through the toothpaste aisle, and there are obviously, right, the Colgates, the Oral-B of the world, right? Which there's stacks and stacks of them. Then there's like Native and Tom's, and I don't remember what other brands, right? But those are uh, the more sustainable, not using any artificial material ingredients, right? Types of brands. And then I saw one, I cannot remember the name of it right now, but then which is also on the sustainable side, right? Of the aisle, basically saying like no artificial ingredients and things like that. Um, and when I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is new. Like, I don't even know what this brand is. And so I was just looking at it. I turned around and it was basically Colgate, made by Colgate, right? So the reason why Colgate feels a need to create such a product is because consumers are now looking for a product that is more natural, that is not made with real ingredients, right? And so um, essentially, as a customer of anything, right, you have the power to steer which direction the company is going through the power of your wallet, right? If you stop purchasing products that are made with artificial dyes, made with artificial flavors, right, made with chemicals, uses cheap material, right, types of things, then companies will have to, because they want to remain in business, right, so companies are typically going where their customers are. And so if the customer has changed, then they will have to create a product to service that new customer who is looking for the more sustainable alternative for whatever, right? Like I was talking about toothpaste. Every single thing that we use as consumers, right? These days there's some sort of sustainable alternative, right, for every single thing. And those alternatives were created maybe because the founder cared about it, right? Cared about, hey, how do I make this sustainable? But at the same time, the reason why they're able to do that is because that's where some of their customers are, and that's the sort of the market that they're trying to service. So through the power of your wallet, right? Customers play a huge role in figuring out or helping companies become more sustainable.
Um, wow, that makes a lot of sense, yeah. I kind of also want to shift gears a little bit and talk about just people who want to get into sustainability. So, for anyone who wants to get into like sustainable startups like microWatt, what skills should they learn?
I think depends on the type of job you're doing, but in one sentence, I will say like every job is a sustainability job. So, uh, like learn if you're coming out of school, right? Like at the end of the day, uh, I mean it's the same thing like you are working at any company, right? Know if you're in marketing, if you're in business, you've got to know the fundamentals of marketing very well, right? In order to work in the sustainability, uh, in order to work in any company, right? That's where I'm saying like every job is a sustainability job, right? Like regardless of which company you work for, I think knowing a business is a business at the end of the day. Um, you are just going after a different type of customer, and then your approach to achieving the same process is maybe different as if you are more of a sustainable company. But then at the end of the day, you're still trying to accomplish a product, you're still trying to sell some sort of product, right? And so how you build and how you sell is what differentiates maybe a sustainability focused company versus a non-sustainability focused company. But at the end of the day, you still need to have the same marketing skills, same sales skills, same operation skills, same engineering skills, right? And so just focus on becoming a good engineer or a good marketing person, right? Whichever your field is, just focus on that, and then just find a way into the company that aligns with your values, right? And then that's how you can get into a sustainability focused company.
And finally, if you could give one piece of advice to anyone interested in entrepreneurship or starting their advice, what would you say? And what type of guidance would you give them?
One piece of advice for somebody interested in entrepreneurship or what? What was the second thing?
Or what guidance would you give them?
Oh, um, I mean, look, uh, think about, right, like what your skill sets are and where you can make the most impact. Uh, I would say focus on, uh, like I said, right, like I think there are very few who can uh, be in high school and start a company, or be in a college dropout and start a company, right? So it's not, uh, think about, right, like focus on building a good skill set in general, right, in whichever your domain is. And then just be curious, I think, is the biggest piece of advice that I give anyone. Be curious and ask a lot of questions, because that is what will help you get to what I said, right? Figuring out the niche and the domain that you want to solve for. That's the only way you can get there. So just be curious and ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. I think that's it for today. Thank you for sharing your insights and your experience with me.